Hey folks, I thought I would just once again address this country song that doesn't seem to be going away, although I think most of us wish that it would. But it's obviously hitting a raw nerve with people. And in some of the writings that I've done, some folks have felt like I'm attacking small towns, which I'm not. I'm very concerned about them. And I think that over idealizing them is not helping some of the challenges within our small town communities. The fact of the matter is, I am small town. In fact, I am probably more small town than 90% of the people watching this video, if you've gotten that far. I was born in a small town. I married a small town girl. Our kids were born in a small town. I worked in small towns till my mid-30s. I toured and played music in dozens and dozens, maybe 100 small towns. Now I live in a suburb community now, in a mid-sized city, but I am small town through and through. These are my people. This is my culture, which is why I'm concerned about it. So the things that I'm concerned about is, as I said, I'm concerned that we continue to over-idealize what small towns are and miss what's actually happening. Small towns are suffering all over America. Rural America is suffering, really struggling. And all you have to do is sort of just do a little bit of digging around and you'll see that what I'm saying is true. Crime is through the roof. It's up in every category. Now, a lot of it goes unreported because if you live in a small town, you may end up seeing your abuser the next day at Walmart. So particularly if it's domestic violence or something like that. But it's true in every crime case. So homicides, robbery, domestic abuse, rape, just every category of crime is through the roof right now. And it's overwhelming law enforcement. Law enforcement simply don't have the resources, the manpower to be able to police all of this, particularly when it comes to drugs, dangerous drugs, meth, crack cocaine, and a whole bunch of other things. They're all just ravaging these communities. And it's very difficult to police because it's so spread out. It's spread out over so many square miles. I read one thing where the cop was just saying, it's not like you're going into this one area and doing a raid. It's spread out all over, so it's nearly impossible to police. In my hometown, police are often frustrated because they spend their time cleaning up cleaning up meth camps and homeless camps when they should be policing, and it's gotten very frustrating. So with meth, with substance abuse, with alcoholism, almost always with that is married to mental health issues. And in most of these small communities, there's no access to mental health. There's no mental health access at all. If you had to see a psychiatrist, you would wait months or years and probably wouldn't even be able to because there's probably not even a psychiatric help within that community. There's very little medical resource at all. Hospitals are closing. Local practitioners are overwhelmed. You just can't keep up. And so that's the condition of so often in small towns. There's high crime rates going unreported. There's alcohol and drug abuse. There's mental health issues. All of those things, when you add them together, result in homelessness, which is also a number that's going through the roof and also a number that's going unreported or underreported. I can personally tell you that the kind of things that happen, I know this story personally, is people will go live in somebody's barn or in a trailer that's on the back 40 or throw up a tent somewhere where nobody will see. So but homelessness is growing like crazy in these small rural communities. So there's this litany of problems, including poverty, underemployment, no employment. I think one of the big challenges within rural America is what's called gentrification. People are selling their homes in large communities. They're making a lot of money. They come in, they buy property, they're building big houses, or they're buying houses within the community, renting them out, turning them into Airbnbs, and they're driving the the price for housing way up, so that the local community can't even afford to live in the city where they grew up, in the town that they grew up. So what do you do if you don't have the skill sets, you don't have the education, you don't have the opportunity, you're poor, and you can't even afford to live in the town that you grew up in? Well, what you do is you end up on public assistance, you go to public housing, and all of the cycles just continue to repeat themselves. So it's becoming very difficult in small town rural America. Now, as a Christian and as a pastor, I am also deeply concerned about the fact that most people are unaware of the fact that most of rural America is unevangelized. They're not Christian. Lifeway just recently put a report on how it's, churches are closing up and people are not practicing their faith in any real way. So all of these things paint this picture that's really painful for me as a small town guy to sort of see. And then when I see Mr. Aldean glorifying it and sort of making it some sort of Mayberry experience with good old boys and God-fearing patriots, that's just not what they are. Now, if you live in a small town that's just that, well, God bless you and good for you. But that doesn't represent small town America. Which brings us to the song itself. Now, first of all, there's no way that you can say that the song is not coming from a threatening tone. If you say, try that in a small town and see how far you get, that is a threatening posture. That's like me poking you in the chest and say that one more time. I mean, there's no other way to interpret it. Now, a lot of us feel like it has, a racist tone to it, and I know a lot of you don't. But it definitely paints a picture about crime that is done in an urban environment, but's not done in a small town environment. And as we've just seen, that's just categorically not true. So then when you look at some of the challenges in urban environments, you look at race and the crime that goes with it, but then you sort of say, well, that's what those urban people, those big city folks do, those people that are a different race than I am. But then you look at this small, good old boy community where those crimes don't exist, so you're making this contrast, which is why I object to it. Terrible crime, like what Aldean talks about, happens with just as much regularity in a small town as it does in an urban environment. And some people have asked, why don't I speak to the urban environment? And the answer is because I don't know much about it. I do know a lot about small towns, so I can speak to that with some level of authority and some level of understanding, but I'm not a big city guy. I've only lived in one for 2.5 years and I didn't like it. So maybe it's racist, maybe it's not. It goes to the boundary of it. I can't help to think when I hear them say, or hear him say, try that in a small town and see how far you get. I can't help but think of that young man, Ahmaud Arbery, 25-year-old guy, just walking through the neighborhood, looking at, this construction like a lot of his neighbors did, just looking at it, and three good old boys get into their trucks, two guys with guns, one guy with a camera videotaping him, and they run him down like an animal and kill him. Let's see how far you get. And they would say they were just protecting our own. They thought he was robbing. So, I don't know, maybe that helps some of y'all, maybe it doesn't, but that's how I can't help but think of the song in that light. Which brings us to the culture of the song. Jason Aldean isn't even small town. He never grew up in one. He probably spent very little time in one. He is a multi-million-dollar country music performing artist. He didn't even write the song. Somebody else wrote the song. Now, I don't know exactly in songwriting. It always kind of happens in a different way. But generally speaking, here's how songwriting, particularly in Nashville, happens. There's these great big publishing companies, and they all have songwriters. A lot of them are just staff songwriters. So somebody wrote the song, their publishing company then approaches other publishing companies, and they pitch the song. At some point, it got to Aldean's company, and the publishers talk about it, and then it goes to management, then it goes to producers, and it goes to A&R people. They're going to look at how it's going to hit with his audience, etc., etc. And eventually it gets down to Aldean. Now, his company will go through hundreds of submissions a year, if not more. Remember, this is a multi-million-dollar industry just for Jason Aldean and his organization, multi-million-dollar organization. And so along the way, there's a lot of very talented, very high-paid business professionals. And you can't tell me that in all that huge process involving dozens and dozens of people, somebody didn't say, hey, wait a second, does this come close to a, to maybe a racist tone? Do you think people will interpret it that way? Is this coming off in a threatening posture? I mean, I guarantee you somebody said that, and maybe they had to fine tune lyrics or something. That happens a lot. They kind of leave a phrase in and take a phrase out. But they essentially said, well, we're going to get as close to the boundary as we can without sort of crossing a line, and that way then we can maintain the Aldean brand. Now, people keep saying, well, he's just writing from his experience. And if he was actually writing from his experience, I'd probably go, well, God bless him. He has the right to do that. The problem with it is he's not. It's not his culture. It's not his experience. So he's taking this issue that is not his cultural expression, and he's using it to get as close to this line as he can, because he knows it's going to gin up all of his fans. It's going to continue to divide our political and cultural discussion. He knows that. And when you divide things, when there's division, there's a lot of money to be made. And that's exactly what my objection is. When you do that, you're taking a culture that doesn't belong to you and monetizing it. In academic circles, that's called cultural appropriation. You take a culture that's not yours, you take it and you monetize it for your benefit, and you make a lot of money off of it on some of the most vulnerable people in our nation. So those are my objections. First of all, I am a small town guy. Second of all, I'm deeply concerned about small town America, and when it gets over idealized, I think that's problematic. Third, I do believe that the song has a threatening tone and a racist tone to it, and at least you have to say it goes as close as you can to get there and hit that boundary. And fourth, and perhaps most importantly, I believe that Jason Aldean is appropriating culture and using it as his own to make a whole lot of money and to continue to divide us, which he has done very, very effectively. So maybe that helps you. Maybe at least it helps you understand my perspective. So if you've gotten this far, thanks for listening, y'all.